welcome to our channel. My name is Danielle. I'm your resident romantic.
And I'm Lindsay, the fantasy fan.
And we are friends
till the book ends.
Thank you for joining us today. This is our first ever book club video. About every 2 weeks, Lindsay and I are going to go back and forth choosing a book that both of us want to read. This week was my pick. The next video is going to be her pick. So we're going to go ahead and discuss some of the things that we thought were good, bad about it. Just to let you know, there are going to be spoilers in it, as it is a book club review.
So the book that Danielle picked for this week is going to be A Quiet Kind of Thunder by Sara Barnard. This was kind of a recent discovery for both of us. We went book shopping together at our local Barnes & Nobles, and this book kind of stuck out to Danielle. And after reading the back, if anybody has read Archer's Voice by Mia Sheridan, this is like the YA version of it. So just to kind of give a quick summary of what we're looking at with this book, we're following two main characters. The first one is Steffi. She has selective mutism. And our second character is Reese, who is part of the deaf community. And we're kind of following them as Reese moves schools to Steffi's school. She is familiar with BSL, which is British Sign Language, and so something to note is that this book does take place in England. So she knows some BSL, and so she is kind of asked to be his interpreter during his first couple days there, and so they kind of strike up a friendship and things go on from there. So we kind of wanted to talk about our general opinions, our ratings, some things we liked, some things we didn't. Danielle, what did you give this book out of 5 stars?
I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. If it were legally allowed, I would give it 6 out of 5 stars.
Alright, so you loved it.
Yes, what did you give it, Lindsay?
I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 5 stars, so I definitely really enjoyed it. So we're going to be breaking up this review kind of into categories. So the first thing that we should chit-chat about probably is the overall plot. The highs, the lows, the favorites, the not-so-muches. What were your favorite parts about the plot of this book?
I thought the plot was actually really well written. I thought the character really created a good sense of flow in there. A lot of times when you're reading books like these, not just YA romance books, but YA romance books that involve personal growth that you're going to find in this one, you almost get the sense that something's going to mess up at the end or mess up in the middle, and you get really paranoid of what it's going to be. I thought the author handled this conflict that they have really well. It wasn't smacking you in the face as a giant problem, but it also wasn't something so subtle that you didn't think the book had a climax. So I thought the plot was really well written. What did you think, Lindsay?
Yeah, I liked the way that the plot flowed. The characters, remember, this is a spoiler-filled video, but the two characters do end up getting, like, officially together about halfway through the book, and I was kind of concerned because I was like, what is the rest of the book going to be like? But I thought that the author really did a good job of not having that be the climax and then everything else be, like, boring after it. I thought that there was still really great content, and it explored some issues that do happen between a relationship between someone who is deaf and someone who isn't. So I thought that the plot pretty much had a really good flow to it, and I didn't feel bored or that there was a lag throughout any of it. So I was impressed by the way the plot went.
Yeah, another thing that I thought of when you were discussing that is not only is Reese deaf while Steffi is hearing, Steffi also has selective mutism. She also has panic attacks. She has a lot of anxiety going on. So it's not just one character that has the flaws and the scars that they need to grow through. I thought it was awesome that both characters had it, and I thought that the plot balanced out well between that.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that this book did a really good job with representation. Obviously, Danielle and I are not part of those communities, so I can't personally speak to the representation. I think the author did a really good job of pointing out that just because Steffi has selective mutism and panic attacks and that Reese is deaf doesn't necessarily mean that those things are inhibiting them from being who they are. Like, I feel like the characters didn't necessarily go through this, like, major, like, identity crisis. I feel like both characters knew who they were, especially Reese. Reese was very confident in who he was, but there were still some vulnerable aspects to both of them. So I feel like it was a really good representation for both of them, and I really thought that this is something that's maybe missing a lot of times in YA books. I feel like I don't see a lot of really positive rep either for therapy, because Steffi goes to therapy, and this is a very therapy positive book. I feel like oftentimes you see books that are really, like, hating on therapy and being like, my therapist sucks or blah, blah, blah. But I feel like this book really did a good job of being like, no, therapy is good. It is helpful, and that people should go to it.
Yes. All right, moving on from the plot, one of the big things that Lindsay and I wanted to talk about were the characters involved in it. Some of them we really enjoyed. Lindsay, if you want to take the lead on this, I know that there was one character we had an issue with.
Yeah, so Danielle and I were talking briefly about the book before we started our review, and we both agreed that Steffi's best friend character. Her name is Tem. We thought that there were some kind of weird inconsistencies and flaws within her as a character. So Tem is supposed to be like the exact opposite of Steffi. She's very outgoing. She has no problem talking when Stephanie might be having, some selective mutism. So she really is supposed to be kind of the foray between like the rest of the world and Steffi, and some of the things that Tem does are good. Like, she doesn't pressure Steffi to feel like she has to talk during situations, and oftentimes I think she can pick up when Steffi's feeling anxious or nervous and is able to kind of fill in the gaps otherwise. But she also was kind of pushing her to do things that she didn't necessarily want to do. Like, there's a scene at a party and Tem kind of like forces Steffi to go along, and
well, no, see, I would actually disagree with that, because I feel like Tem, she doesn't completely force Steffi, but she's also like, I understand if you can't make it, but it would be really great if you could make it, because that's the party where Steffi meets Tem's boyfriend, not boyfriend, Karam. So it's a big moment for Tem. So I guess we disagree on that.
I feel like Tem guilt trips Steffi a lot into kind of feeling like she has to do something because she doesn't want to disappoint her friend who has done so much for her. I also think that we both thought that Tem had some inconsistencies in like her actions and her behaviors because,
yes.
Steffi views Tem as kind of this like super friend who can do no wrong. But I think we both thought towards the end, Tem gets very friend jealous of Steffi and Reese's relationship. And she also kind of has a moment where she's really mean to Steffi, and Steffi does not deserve it. And Steffi kind of feels like she did something wrong, and Tem's like, yes, you did, when in reality, Tem's kind of the one in the wrong.
Well, that's what also annoyed me about Tem's character. Like, I know that she's being friend jealous, but the big blow-up that they have is because Karam finally decides that, him and Tem are not going to work out, they're not going to be in a relationship, etc. Tem is heartbroken. Tem's trying to reach out to Steffi to talk about it, and Steffi's unavailable. She's on a weekend getaway with her boyfriend that she's actually keeping secret because they want to be adventurous. And so Steffi's not answering her phone, and Tem's leaving her all these messages saying, I'm heartbroken, you're not responding. Essentially, forget you, I hate you. And when they finally talk about it to move on from it, Tem's like, well, why didn't you ask me about it? If you had just asked us about it, you would have known that there was something wrong with us. Yet Steffi does multiple times throughout the book, and Tem gets all upset. She's like, why can't you just be happy for me? So I thought that inconsistency at the end was really ticking me off.
Yeah, and it's also one of those things where if you're not comfortable talking about your problems or you're not sharing, you can't expect everybody else around you to be like, what's wrong, Danielle? Tell me everything. And if Danielle's like, nothing's wrong, everything's fine, then you're like, okay. So definitely I picked up on that too and thought it was kind of an annoying, weird kind of plot issue.
Right.
Or character issue.
Everything issue. Another thing I liked with the characters, specifically Steffi's parents. So you have the dad and the mom. They did split when Steffi was younger. I like that the author created two separate parental views because the mom can't stand the selective mutism. She thinks that Steffi was doing it to get attention. She thinks that Steffi's doing it on purpose and she could stop any time. There's a scene in the book where Steffi talks about how her mom literally abandoned Steffi in a grocery store when she was younger to kind of force Steffi to speak up. And Steffi's mute. She doesn't know what to do. She goes to someone for help. She's crying. And her mom's yelling at her for not being able to ask someone for help. And then on the other hand, you have the dad who's very supportive of it. He's supportive of the different therapies, the different medications. He's supportive of trying anything natural that can work Steffi up to it. And when Steffi has these issues, he's very patient. She freaks out going into a restaurant to meet Reese's family with him, and she sits in the car for 5 minutes, and her dad just lets her. He works through everything that she's thinking. So I thought it was good that Sara wrote this book to have two differentiating views, because you don't always have fully supportive parents when it comes to these things.
Yeah, I definitely thought the two different viewpoints was interesting, because I think her mom is definitely, in the beginning, was not thinking that Steffi's selective mutism was like, an actual health problem, which it is. She's not doing it on purpose. She's not doing it to be difficult. And I think you see some character growth towards the end because her mom really doesn't want Steffi to go to university because she doesn't think that Steffi's going to be able to handle it. But I think Steffi proves throughout the book that she can be independent. Like, if she has to do something, she can do it. It just might take her a little longer, or she might do it in a different way. And I think by the end of the book, her mom kind of comes around, and I think we see a lot of growth within her mom and her ideas. And, I really liked her dad. I really loved Also, the fact that it was the dad in this situation that was kind of the more supportive and patient one, because I feel like oftentimes books portray the divorced dad as kind of like absent and not really there.
Yes, that's a good point.
So I really liked the fact that Steffi like primarily lived with her dad, and her dad was the one who was the most supportive and the most understanding, because I feel like we don't get that like positive male rep always in books. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah. So now that we discussed specifically the plot and the characters, Lindsay and I are just going to break it up into some of our favorite parts, just to kind of highlight more about what we enjoyed about the book.
So I guess my favorite part of the book isn't necessarily like a specific scene, but I really enjoyed the beginning part where you're seeing Steffi and Reese develop a friendship first. I really enjoyed friends to kind of dating instead of just being like nothing to dating. I enjoyed that there was like a character build up. You got to see how they interacted with each other and how they kind of just get together, and I really enjoyed that because it was very wholesome, and I kind of really appreciated this way of them getting together, because I feel like oftentimes in kind of a YA book, it's either like really juvenile and they're like, we held hands and so we're dating, or they like move straight to like, we hooked up and we're dating now. And I feel like this had a really like accurate representation of what it's like to be 17 years old and your first relationship. It's kind of like, you know, you're exploring each other's thoughts, feelings, ideas, like bodies too. And I really think that this book did a really excellent job at all of that.
I would agree with that. Following up on that towards the end, some of my favorite scenes in it were actually the sex scenes. There are 2 scenes in it. The first one, Reese and Steffi don't go all the way. They kind of just explore each other first. The second time they do. I just really enjoyed how Sara wrote those scenes, because there is still some semi-romance with it. You see the love that the characters have for each other as they're opening up themselves physically to each other. But at the same time, you get Steffi's monologue of, oh, is this how I do it? Is this, my hand are still in his pants? Is that how it's supposed to be? It's awkward and confusing, which is usually how a lot of people's first time really is. So I thought that Sara didn't try and glorify that. She opened it up completely to everyone, and I thought it was funny, it was genuine, it was sincere. I really loved that part of it.
Yeah, and also this book is sex positive, which is good. I feel like a lot of times, either, like I said, in a YA book, it's like nothing, or it's like full force. I feel like this was such a good in the middle, where there are wholesome parts and there are parts of like, we're adults and, you know, teenagers have sex. So I thought that it was a really good representation of being sex positive without kind of going overboard.
Absolutely. One thing I thought about while I was reading it, now, like Lindsay said, neither of us are part of the deaf community. I did take a couple of American Sign Language classes in college, so I know some of the culture that is surrounded with that, and I thought that the author was really upfront and honest with a lot of the deaf community experiences you would have. She was very on point with covering all of the details involving cognitive behavioral therapy as well. I went to school for a psychology degree, so everything was so detailed that either the author really did her research on this, or I do almost wonder if the author has some kind of backgrounds with either of these. So even if she doesn't have background in them, I thought the author must have done a really good job researching it to write such an authentic book with this.
And actually, if you read the very last part in her kind of author's notes, she says she's not part of the deaf community. And she does go over the fact that this is not an Own Voices book as far as the deaf community goes. But she says that she did do extensive research. She talked to people, and she also apologizes ahead of time if none of the rep or the rep isn't exactly accurate. So, you know, take it as you will. I know, like, sometimes people have problems with people who aren't writing from an Own Voices kind of viewpoint. But personally, I didn't feel like anything stood out to me as being, like, offensive or, like, overtly wrong. But once again, we're not part of that community. So, you know, just as a warning to you guys, this isn't Own Voices. But I think from my personal, reading experience, I think she did a good job.
I think so, too.
So, Sara Barnard does have a couple other books. She has one called Fragile Like Us and another one called Goodbye Perfect. So, perhaps we will see one of these books pop up in the future.
Oh, absolutely. That's going on my TBR, let me tell you.
Since Danielle and I both enjoyed this book. Overall ratings, Danielle gave it a 5 out of 5. I gave it a 4 out of 5. We might read from this author in the future.
We most definitely will read from this author in the future.
Read between the lines. All right, we know what Danielle's picking for our next book club. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for watching our channel today.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure that you give it a like. Please click subscribe so you can get notifications of all of our future videos. And if you have read this book, we want to hear what you guys think about it.
Our next book club book is actually a book that I picked because I've heard nothing but great things about it on YouTube, especially around the holiday season. But I picked The Afterlife of Holly Chase by Cynthia Hand. We will be reading that in the upcoming weeks and having a review come out for you around Christmas. So we are looking forward to that.
Absolutely. Thank you guys again for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
Bye!